How's it going, guys? It's Mr. Lone Wolf, and today I'm going to go and test this thing out. It's a new mod again, the Azov Iceberg. It's by the same dude that did the twice twin steer, so yeah, we'll get stuck in, see how it goes. I mean, the main difference is it's got some raised suspension, a lot more choice of tyres, which is pretty cool, including the chained, which is nice because the thing is supposed to be like some snow-focused vehicle, and yeah, the fact that it never had chained and slipped around like a madman on ice was kind of a bit of a negative. We've also got some big, like, snail snorkels. Got the KRS crane, which out of all the little cranes, is my favourite so far. Can also have saddle high and saddle low, so you can get basically all the trailers. Originally, with the normal one, you could tow the normal trailers anyway. But yeah, saddle high and saddle low stuff was off limits. I'm going to go and do this mission called Riverside Repair. Kind of zip up to the garage, cut across the map, grab some wooden planks, and then just deliver them. It was just more an excuse to go cruising around in this thing. First things first, of course, got to bring a goddamn horse or a vehicle with us, because you never know. One thing I do like about this Azov Antarctic, you can have two lots of roof racks, but this crane obviously blocks you from getting the roof rack like on that cabin thing, but again, because it's kind of got two roofs, got an extra roof for a roof rack, but again, bring the professional, and that's got a roof rack anyway, that's got plenty of points. The roof rack that you lose by having the crane, I think has only got 120 or 150 repair points. Again, like the life's got 300, so I'd rather take that anyway. This is a quick example between the two of them, and other than the fact you can see like the upgraded one, the Iceberg one, has got a wider tyres, or just like they sit wider, they're not actually wider themselves, but yeah, that's nice. The other main thing is obviously this steers by like having an articulated middle, but the actual wheels don't steer at all. With this Iceberg, the upgraded version, it's a really good idea, to be honest, and it makes it feel like a really nice drive. It's still got a little bit of articulation in it, but they basically added steerable front wheels, and it just makes it so much nicer to drive. Because when I originally got this vehicle, the first time I ever tried it, I drove it down the road and I could barely keep the thing in a straight bloody line, and it was just, I was like, nope, don't like it at all. Didn't review it or anything for ages. When they updated that steering option where you could go from like controller to steering wheel or something, it basically made the wheels like return to centre rather than just staying where they were or whatever, and it kind of helped this a little bit. And yeah, I mean, this truck really, it was one of them. It was like, there was something about it I always liked, and I think the fact that I liked was that it had some nice weight to it, it had some nice big wheels to it, and those added together, like the weight particularly, sort of actually made it feel like a pretty realistic truck in this game. And yeah, just the way like it went through the mud rather than just sitting on top of it, it kind of had enough weight to punch its way through and squidge through to the better terrain underneath, and it just came off feeling like quite a nice truck in some ways, but then in other ways it was a bit of a pain. It was a bit anticlimactic, considering it was basically one of, if not, I mean, the two main trucks I think we were all kind of eyeballing when we first got the game was this and the Derry 4520, and both of them turned out, the Derry I think is just a complete disaster because it's gutless and all the rest of it. Well, it had its moments every now and then, but all things considered, when you're towing cargo and all the rest of it, it wasn't up to, like, you know, the top end vehicles in the game. Stuff like the Azov Dolphin walks all over that, and that's only like level 14 to unlock, and pretty cheap, only like 80 something grand I think as well. So yeah, like I said, this one, there was elements I liked about it, but yeah, it was too narrow, so it used to tip over fairly easily. The power wasn't really too bad. Like I said, the tyres were nice, but the fact that it was missing chained was a bit of a pain. It also didn't really have many setups to it. You couldn't get a saddle high or a saddle low. You could basically get a sideboard and a flatbed. I'll just say now as well, the turning circle was pretty nice. I actually was able to spin round in just that piece of yard rather than like looping round under the crane. Yeah, and I mean, they've basically addressed those main problems. It sits wider now. The chained, a bit like the same with the twin steer, they're called like heavy single chains, and they appeared to add more weight. I went off-roading on purpose there, but as I jumped off the road I didn't take any suspension damage or anything, which is nice. I've been kind of bombing around and purposely trying to bash it around a bit, but for the most part it's not made of glass or anything. It's pretty nice, like you can kind of throw it around a bit, but at the same time it's not completely like invincible and unbreakable or anything. But I still think, yeah, doing like a little jump like that, some trucks you do like a little 1 foot jump and it completely deletes it, and you sort of think, in real life, like, that's suspension and everything's designed to like soak up that hit Obviously, if you're going to fly off like a 10-foot drop or something, fair enough. But yeah, I mean, it feels pretty well balanced in that sense. I assume there's more power to it. I think it's got the normal engines though, but it certainly feels like there's a bit of a boost in torque or power or something. But again, it doesn't feel overdone. It's still the sort of thing like with this game, a lot of it is very slow gameplay, and when you think about it, you're only going 10 or 15 miles an hour in a lot of situations. But in real life, trucks, even the big, slow, lumbering trucks, you know, they're capable of faster than 15 miles an hour. But you can always drop it down to high-low, or you can get a different gearbox on it and stuff. So, again, there's yeah, for people who want to get something even more stock, less powerful, etc. Like those options have always been in the game, really. It's, I mean, a bit like I was saying with the Derry 4520. If its current form was its stock form, it wouldn't be so bad if there was somewhere to go from there. But that's like the fully upgraded version isn't even that. Like, it doesn't really wow or anything like that. So I'd say the older Derry, I can't remember the name of it, but that one I think is better than the Derry 4520. Yeah, I mean, you can see now, this thing just feels really nice to drive. The steering is a hell of a lot better. It does actually, it feels one of the better steering trucks in the game. Cutting through here, by the way, I've got to add a bit of context, because it's only fair. I kind of purposely went over to the right and went a lot deeper. Yeah, that's what she said. Yeah, and basically the current got me, and obviously I'm near enough all the way under now. And I think as I was tipping over to the side, it wasn't quite getting grip at the minute, but it's more the current was holding me in place. I'm only mentioning that because I've cut through it in various other trucks, but I used to cut through what would be the equivalent, like further over to the left, where it's a bit more shallow and it's easier to cut through. So I only wanted to mention it because if I didn't, it puts this in a worse light than I think it deserves, because it is actually, I've been driving it around through the water and all sorts, and yeah, it's pretty good at motoring through water. Obviously with those snorkels sticking up, they're in like the perfect place as well behind that cab, so if you're going in kind of nose first, they sit far enough back that you don't immediately drown them at your nose, but then at the same time as you're driving back out of a deep river, they're kind of not so far at the back that they're now going to plunge in and drown you that way. So yeah, and that's basically now why I looped around and went for another little go at cutting across here, because I just thought it was fair, really. Sometimes I'll even just recover and do it again for the sakes of a smoother run, but yeah, now I've actually doubled around. I've kind of cut through where I do on all the other vehicles, and it was going through and out there no problem. It's just this thing sits so high, and it's quite a tall vehicle anyway, that I tried to push my luck a bit and going over to the right, and like I said, it wasn't really the depth of the water, it was just more the current catches you. The current is a bit awkward there. I've had a few trucks cutting across there where even if the truck's fine, the current grabs the trailer pretty quick and starts trying to lever you over and stuff. Yeah, so anyway, we'll carry on motoring along. As you can see though, it's got quite a nice pace to it, I think, and it's not a ridiculous pace. I'm still only going like 10-15 miles an hour or something now. But yeah, again, the steering is just a hell of a lot better. It's nice though that it's still got a little bit of articulation, because it still keeps a slight uniqueness to it, but for the most part, it's just a whole smoother experience, the fact that it has steerable wheels. Yeah, for no apparent reason, just messing around. I tried to climb over these logs. The trailer kind of got scooted over to the side, and it made the loaf fly off and that. And the only reason I edited that bit out, I had no problem getting the loaf back on, which is where it's on now. The crane was just, you know, like, and it's nothing to do with this mod, but you know, once you go to, you extend the crane and it gives you the point that you're going to attach the crane to. It'd be nice if you could scroll through those points, like the winches, because I basically was just in an awkward bit where I couldn't quite reach the second box to load it onto the trailer. And yeah, it was literally like 4 or 5 minutes of just not really a lot going on, just me trying to reverse up a little bit and reach this bloody box. Again, if you could just scroll through the crane points like you could the winch points, it would have just been a non-issue. So I came back, couldn't let it beat me that easily, so I kind of approached a little bit further over to the left though, so the trailer doesn't just kind of skid over sideways. It was getting close. It thought about it, but we're all good. And again, most trucks really wouldn't be too keen on doing that anyway, and yeah, there was no no particular reason for it. But to be honest, as I was testing this tonight, I thought like, oh, I'll go and do a few bits and bobs, and it's just one of those trucks that overall it was pretty nice to drive, and it yeah, I just kind of ended up doing little extra bits and bobs messing around, because it was one of those trucks that sort of I don't feel like I want to put it down after 5 minutes. It's kind of quite happy to just keep pushing your luck. And yeah, this is like pretty much how this truck should have been originally in the game. If this was the prize for grinding all the way up to nearly level 30, I think it's like level 26 or something when you get this, yeah, it would have felt like a pretty good prize at the end of it. And again, I mean, it's still got some limitations, but nothing. I like certain limitations, like the fact that the tippiness is sorted on it. It's certainly not untippable, but it's definitely not tippable, and it's like, it's nice that the potential risk is still there, because I don't want something that's just absolutely impossible to tip and never get slowed down by anything and all the rest of it. But at the same time, yeah, part of the thing I like about this game, I've already done like the challenging bits of the game. I've pretty much completed my first playthrough. I'm aware of the level of difficulty the game's tried to throw at me, and I think within reason it's kind of like I'm comfortable with knowing I can do these missions, but when they slow them down to such a degree, it's kind of getting to the point where it's like, I don't need to prove to myself anymore I can do the mission. I'd like to have a nice time and a nice drive on the mission. Like, part of the fun is just cruising around on the maps, enjoying the view, enjoying the terrain, and enjoying your vehicle actually conquering the terrain, rather than, yeah, if it's all just constantly, you know, 2 miles an hour wheel spinning through mud, there's only so long that can be entertaining before you just want, yeah, something a little different. And I think this thing finds the balance pretty well. And again, I mean, I went through here because I knew it was pretty deep water through here. I've drove through here before with the Dolphin and Loaf, and yeah, but I knew there was no current going on here, so rather than it kind of catching the trailer and hanging on to me and all sorts, I knew it'd be a little bit of a fairer example of how well it can go through water. And again, I mean, with the snorkels in the position they are, this has probably got the highest snorkels in the game. I would have thought if you parked all the vehicles next to each other, a contender would probably be the P16. That definitely sits pretty high and has a pretty tall snorkel on it. But either way, it's definitely up there. And that's definitely what she said. So yeah, it's nice to have a truck that, again, it's not just the fact that it can go through water, but because this has always had a nice bit of weight to it anyway, I think the weight situation is sort of distributed and handled better in this, because the old ones seem to have weight kind of evenly spread through it. And realistically, I mean, the top half of the actual cab is, you know, 90% fresh air, and there's a windscreen and a metal frame of the roof. That cabin on the back is like some fiberglass cabin that's going to weigh absolute sod all as well, compared to the actual chassis and the wheels and the gearbox and the engine. So in real life, this would clearly be weighted very low down. In the game, they kind of made it spread evenly throughout. Whether they've adjusted the weight itself or they've just added extra weight on the wheels, I'm not sure, but the end result is like, it just, yeah, it feels more sensible, more how it should be. I was hesitating for a sec whether to just finish doing that mission, because, like I say, until they add something where we can actually reset missions, then it kind of, now I've done that mission, that's it. It's gone forever from that playthrough. I'll never be able to do that mission again unless I start a whole new game and complete everything else to get up to that point. And then now, I mean, like I said, it was pretty nice cruising around in it, so even though I just finished the mission, Loaf was going on a bit of a tip there, but he's all good. Goddamn professional. Yeah, it was just quite nice to cruise around, so I just, every time I sort of finished a bit of footage, just kept holding the throttle down and keep going for a bit and seeing what would happen. Well, I was going to head now to the trailer store. Not that I'm shy of leaving trailers scattered around everywhere. Although this is my second playthrough, so far I've been a little bit more tidy with it all. And again now, I mean, it was a good chance. I was nearly going to swerve around. I was like, no, it was a nice little jump. See, I mean, it was a few foot jump, I admit. But it was nice, I think, that it didn't take suspension damage there, because, again, if the suspension can't handle its own vehicle, then it kind of needs to be upgraded. I just got a little caught on the tree there. And yeah, I was purposely cutting through just to push my luck and see how this thing handles. And with the raised suspension as well, it keeps the nose high enough, because it's, I mean, it's not got a bruised chin on it or anything. It's got a bit of a definite overhang, but it kind of it always sat fairly nice and high anyway. Luckily, those steps that you see at the side, they're like, they basically flex. So they're equivalent of just not even there. And yeah, it's got kind of like an angled front lower end, so for the most part it's scooted over stuff anyway. And now there's a bit of messing around with the loaf. I loaded the loaf onto the roof just to see if I could pack the vehicle, as I was able to the other day on, what was it, Bruce and the Dolphin. Yeah, it didn't offer me the chance on this one. Maybe I'll try it at some point. If I knock that out of the roof rack off, it might get on there. Another nice thing that I always use to do this with a loaf as well. Yeah, a loaf just bridges that little centre chassis rails pretty nicely, so it sits on the frame pretty well. And with the crane, you can actually pin it down and yeah, again, go for another little drive. It'd be quite nice. It's not the end of the world or anything, but I remember saying a little while ago, that cabin that's on the back that doesn't really do anything, it'd be nice if that in itself was like a repair cabin. But again, that's not really, I'd say, for the mods. I'm surprised they didn't just do that anyway. In the yeah, in the base game, it would have been quite a good, considering it's like an Antarctic exploration type vehicle. I'm surprised they didn't give it any long range supplies. So you can see there, as I fling around the corner, it went to tip, but it was nice. One, it went to tip, which is pretty good, because again, I don't want it to be absolutely untippable, but it also thought about it, changed its mind, and settled back to its wheels, which was, yeah, pretty nice, because I didn't push my luck too much around there. And while I was here over this end of the map, I thought I may as well go and drive it through Black River quickly. And you can see, I mean, this is one of the many reasons. Look at that loaf. Straight into action. Flings himself forward. And I assume, what a goddamn horse of a vehicle he is, he's basically helping power the rear wheels now. Loaf traction applied. We are motoring through that river. I mean, it's probably 98% loaf now. Yeah, made it through there, no problem, which I would expect this would, though, if you actually think about it. When you drive that river, it's not like that river's, you know, 15 foot deep or something. It's only like 4 or 5 foot deep, if that, got a sort of slow flowing river going there. So yeah, really, most off-road vehicles you'd expect to cut through there pretty nicely. And you see, when you want to disengage loaf traction, you just bounce yourself off a tree. He scoots backwards, disengages his wheels, and we're good to go again. However, should the situation ever arise where you need to re-engage loaf horsepower, he's back in action, saving the day yet again. Extra loaf boost horsepower. Might only be 1 extra horsepower, but that's a pretty magnificent horse, if I do say so myself. We hope and get them extra horsepower as we're motoring up the hill. It's in high range now, though. It ticks along very nicely in high range. But right now, I wasn't really paying attention. I was having a sip of my coffee. Last second, I was like, oh no. Killed a tree, but that's what you get, tree. It's probably on the list. Most of them are. Driving like a Dave. Well, he doesn't drive as mental as he used to. He did reverse and park on somebody once, but under the circumstances it could have happened to anybody. But that's the funny thing about Dave. It could have happened to anybody, but it actually happened to Dave. And someone was saying about a Dave story, so yeah. I'll let you know this one quickly. It was years ago when he was like just past his test or whatever. It was at night and stuff as well. There was a big bunch of like 30 or 40 people. He wasn't mates of all of them, but it's just one of them, like big group of sort of teenagers all gathering around. There was some of his mates in there, so he was reverse parking into this spot, like literally right behind his car. Somebody got punched and knocked out, and they just obviously like insta dropped and flopped onto the road as Dave was reversing into this spot. So he ended up reversing up on the guy, and then obviously quickly realised like what the hell, and drove forward off him. And yeah, a few days later, Dave's seen this guy who didn't really seem too bothered that he'd been knocked out, but he said, oh yeah, you reversed on me. And he said, oh, I've been to the police and shown them. See, you can't even make this stuff up. He had a bruise on his chest that was the exact tread pattern of Dave's car. So he was like, yeah, the police have seen these bruises and they can match it to your car, which is like, the police aren't going to do anything, and nothing ever did happen, because it's like, what are you going to do him for? He's reversing into a parking spot as you got knocked out and fell right behind his car. Like, he hasn't done anything. The person who knocked you out, if anything. Yeah, but as the guy said, oh yeah, I've shown the police the bruise, so they'll know the tread pattern. Dave's like, oh yeah, it's alright, I just put some alloys on the car earlier, so just by pure chance, he'd swapped his tread pattern. And again, like, the police did nothing, they wouldn't do it, they can't. It's like, you can't do somebody for... There's 40 witnesses that can say, yeah, that guy dropped, like, right behind the car as it's reversing, so... And again, it was at night, all the rest of it. But yeah, that's just one of the many things with a Dave, that kind of stuff can happen. By the way, yeah, I rammed the original Antarctic over because why not? And just to make sure, I mean, there's no good taking the goddamn horse of a vehicle around if you can't unload yourself. That's what she said. Yeah, so he got his way, he got back off the Antarctic. I did a winch from the front of the loaf to the back of the Antarctic and zipped it off. Now, I fancied having a go at flipping this thing. And I was using the other Antarctic Iceberg thing as a winch point, but I know for a fact, because I've done it before, I could use those like garage posts as a sort of wedge and flip the Antarctic that way, but I didn't really want to disturb my trailers if I could help it. But as you can see, here's a little horse with a vehicle. He worked it out. He saved the day. Everyone's rescued. And yeah, this is just one last little drive around back on White Valley. Went flying off the cliff. Nosedived pretty well. I was just chancing it, like, you never know. Could be a loaf hiding in them hills somewhere. I'm sure a few of them have saved me before in that situation, but yeah, fortunately, see, every now and then it was worth giving a go. I found a stick that didn't actually move, and it flipped me back, which again, it was quite nice how, I wouldn't say it's easy to flip, but it was not bad, like, at least because it's got a nice bit of weight lower down, it's sort of helping a little bit tip its way back to its wheels. Certainly enough that, again, I mean, it's a game, you just want to get on playing around. It's I could have easily just sent in a crane and rescued it. Well, again, that's the thing, though, if the cranes were better, it'd make, like, when the game was originally out, I used to do loads of rescues with the big cranes, because they're actually, like, enough to where you could sort of reasonably rescue a vehicle. These days, it's just so close that it's like, you end up being disappointed in the crane mechanics rather than, like, you're not able to flip the vehicle that you've got or whatever. And again, that was one of the many reasons I just kept taking a horse in the end, because that was able to flip everything on its own one way or another. We'll always find a way with a loaf. Yeah, cutting across that water, though, again, there might be a little current there, but there's nothing like that river was earlier. And it cut across there pretty nicely, which not many vehicles get across there. I think the P16 probably could, or possibly. And I believe the Dolphin got across there as well. Had a loaf with him, of course. Dolphin and a loaf. Good little pair. Yeah, but it made it over there, then it drove up that hill, so it was pretty nice on the grip and the power and all the rest of it. Made its way over those rocks pretty nicely. I jumped off there for no apparent reason, just because, why not? And again, I mean, well, I don't even know why they have these winch points in the game, because they just never do anything. In fact, actually, I have to say that's not completely true, because one of the few vehicles that can actually make use of those winch points is the loaf. It's I've saved myself with them winch points quite a lot. So I flew off the cliff again, nosedived pretty well, but it landed pretty straight this time, so I was able to fire up the engines and get out of there. But it flies pretty nice, like, again, for what it's worth. Made a pretty nice loaf hole, if I do say so myself. The loaf at the time of his life in there, flipping trucks. But yeah, as you can see, I mean, I just kept messing around with it, because it was just quite fun to drive. It's, yeah, I think a well-balanced, nice truck. Definitely a mod worth giving a go. And it's, like I said, it's kind of how I hoped this vehicle would be originally. I still don't think it's completely ridiculous OP or anything like that. I've seen, I mean, it's one of them, it's like how long's a piece of string. You can watch videos of trucks getting stuck in what looks like some pretty shallow mud and all the rest of it. You can see other videos where there's trucks going through mud that's like up to the windows and everything, so you can't always say like automatically would or wouldn't get through a certain place, but there is still an element, like, I've had months and months and months in this game of, like, bombing around in mud at 2 miles an hour. It's nice to just go randomly roaming around like this and exploring all the, yeah, different terrain. Conquering it again, like, climbing up to the top of the hills and that. I got away bloody lucky here. It basically tipped, but because I stuck some steering into it, I think I just about caught it. And again, that tiny bit of articulation helps it used to as well. Like, once you articulate it, it kind of helps tip the middle back the way you want it to go. And yeah, I mean, that's a little bit, like, extreme. I wouldn't expect to be pulling that stuff off in real life, but, you know, I floored it, went down there, hoped for the best. Things went pretty well. And lastly, this was like earlier in the day, that's why it's just blue at the minute, but it's basically the same setup and everything. So even cutting across that bit though from the garage to like, if I went straight on, I would have got to the airport. Yeah, a lot of stuff gets seriously held up there. Like, it's a lot more trollish than it would look from the depth of the snow and everything. And yeah, this thing motored along there. That's one reason really why I always like the original version of this, is the fact that the tyres on it were massive. It's, yeah, rather than having to cut through the terrain, it kind of rolls over the terrain. I mean, it's kind of stands to reason in real life. That's why, like, tractors, for example, have massive rear tyres, because it can climb over stuff rather than having to, like, kind of bite its way through it or whatever. It just, yeah, a massive wheel and it rolls over everything. And this thing does kind of climb over the terrain and through it pretty nicely, and obviously this is just a much better version. You can even see now the normal one would be iffy there at best. It'd certainly be wanting to tip. I mean, again, feeding like some articulation into it helped not tip it in certain situations, but in some respects it was like unavoidable, because, like I said, the weight was just distributed so evenly from like the bottom to the top that once it started tipping, there's not a hell of a lot you could do to fight it. And because it had very narrow like axles and everything, it just, yeah, it didn't go too well. And again, at this point I'm just messing around. I went to go and see if I could knock that tree. Typical fashion, I got a bit squirrely, dug in, flipped round. Tree's alive this time. We'll get them next time. And yeah, just one last little scramble up here. It, lost a little bit of grip at the bout here, but again, it's not really, it's more like the rocks, just the way they're programmed in this game. There's no deformation obviously to the rocks or anything, so in game they're like a pure smooth glass surface, and then like the tyres don't tend to sponge very well and grip onto them. It's just kind of, unless you're on like the right angle, the rocks do get a bit slippy. But yeah, that's about it though. I definitely recommend getting this mod. It's a good laugh, feels good to drive, and yeah, it's about how this thing should be. That's about it for today though. I hope you've enjoyed, I hope that helps. Thanks for watching, thanks to my Patreon members, and I'll be back soon.